Hello there, friend. It's Casper. I am back here on the YouTubes to talk to you about some common mistakes that are made in breathwork. And I actually wanted to do one video with the 3 most common mistakes, but I found myself ranting for so long about each of them that I'll do separate videos. And in this first one about things that breathworkers should stop doing is a very important one because it is about your safety, and this is to stop chasing the high. Now, a lot of people find breathwork, especially intense modalities of breathwork, during some event or during, for example, an online training, or they just find it on YouTube. They practice this, they breathe deep, they hyperventilate. You probably know the drill. And they end up having a mind-blowing experience. They have strong physical effects and they feel high, they feel stoned, they feel this wonderful sensation. And they're like, yes, that is what breathwork is about. That is what breathwork should give me, and they start chasing that experience. Now, you might be one of these people, or you might be a breath coach that facilitates these experiences for people, trying to get people high. And in all scenarios, chasing this high is not a good idea. See, I meet people who say like, yeah, I practice 30 minutes of breathwork every morning. I'm super experienced breathworker and all this stuff. And then I watch them take one deep breath, or I watch them try to take a calm breath or a nice horizontal breath or a belly breath, and they really can't do it anymore because what they do is just like the guy they saw teach it on the internet. They basically hyperventilate in this super suboptimal way, which is like like that. They breathe like this for 30 minutes every day, hold their breath, do squeezing. This is all relatively dangerous, and it has a lot of downsides to practice in this way. And basically, these people who practice 30 minutes every day, they actually have dysregulated their breathing. They actually have more dysfunctional breathing probably than they did before they started doing this. So let's talk about the high for a moment. When you do intense breath work, you definitely can get some really amazing experiences. One of the things that happens is you overexert a lot of the CO2 from your system. And when you overexert this CO2, generally there's a lower amount of oxygen ending up in the brain. And with this lower amount of oxygen ending up in the brain basically has to cut down on the most expensive functions, one of which is executive functions. So this prefrontal lobe that does a lot of analytical thinking, that does a lot of planning, that does a lot of telling you what is normal and what is not. This gets a little bit less oxygen, which means that there's more space to start to experience other realms of our awareness. Now, this is, of course, a very small abbreviation of what happens, but in general, what you should know is that when you hyperventilate and you breathe very deep, you're basically depriving your brain of oxygen. Intermittently, of course, only during the time that you're doing this hyperventilation, but it is happening. In general, this is not necessarily a bad thing. That's not something that is inherently damaging. What happens though is that once people experience these profound effects, when their prefrontal lobe is less active, they become thoughtless, they feel more emotions, sometimes they see awesome colors or get amazing insights, they get a really psychedelic experience. This is awesome. Definitely, I practice this, I teach this is great. The problem is when somebody takes that experience and goes, that is what breathwork is about, and now I must have this experience every single time I practice breathwork. And then we start chasing the high. The thing is, when you start practicing in this way and you do these breathing techniques for the first time, your body is unused to it. And it's very easy to get this really heavy, intense effect. You get the tingling sensations, the dizziness, the ringing in your ears, all the good stuff. And then as you practice, your body basically adapts to these intense physiological states, and you get less and less of these intense experiences. Unless, of course, when you start to breathe more and more and even more intensely. And in the end, actually, for most people who practice for multiple years, they end up not getting these intense experiences at all anymore. So here's this idea that people start their breathwork journey with. This is breathwork. This is what I'm supposed to feel. Okay, oops, I'm not feeling it anymore, but I want to feel it. What will I do? I will start to increase the intensity of the breathwork. Then, after a while, this doesn't really work anymore, so they keep going intenser, more intense, and more intense, and more intense. Now, what's the problem with this? People trying to get these really intense sensations, they generally start to use more sympathetic breathing function, right? So you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that allows you to feel calm and to recover and to relax. And if you engage with this part of your nervous system, the breathing functions that belong to this are generally slow, nasal, horizontal breathing, belly breathing, right, on the low end. And then you have the sympathetic nervous system, which does fight and flight, which does intensity, activation, goal mindset, these kinds of things. And the breathing mechanics that kind of belong to that are mouth breathing, are breathing up in the chest in a vertical way, is often breathing from the neck and from the shoulder muscles. So this is like this highly sympathetic breathing. And it also produces a lot of the biochemistry, the neurochemistry that leads to these intense experiences. So, which in general is great, but the problem is when people start chasing the high is that they spend their whole time that they're practicing breath basically using breathing mechanics and breathing styles that trigger the sympathetic nervous system. So you get this, you start to pump with your chest up and down, and you start to arch your spine, you start to do all kinds of things in order to get the air moving in and out as hard and as fast as possible, to get to this oxygen deprivation, to get to this dysregulation, and to get to the point where you have your strong effects. Now, here's something that you have to understand. Whatever you practice is what you get better at. And form really adapts to function. So if you spend every day trying to chase this really intense high by using these really intense breathing styles, then you're training those muscles that aren't primary breathing muscles to do breathing. And you're training your nervous system to be really fast at going into the sympathetic state. And the combination of this is actually that it makes you less resilient for stress. It actually makes you weaker. It trains your body to think, oh, as soon as there's any type of breathing needed that is more than just resting breathing, I'm going to use these very intense mechanics. So these people who are chasing the high, they often unlearn to actually have proper resting breathing. They unlearn breathing deep into their body, breathing through their nose. And this way, they're priming their body to be more likely to go into these sympathetic high-stress states throughout their day. Another issue with this is it is pretty intensely dysregulating to breathe in this way. So these really intense breathing techniques that supposedly give these very strong effects. By the way, there's other ways to get these effects, which I'll get to in a second. These really intense breathing styles, they of course offload a lot of carbon dioxide from your body, and also they limit the uptake of oxygen on a cellular level. To keep it very brief, you breathe out, you release CO2. You breathe in, you're trying to take up oxygen. This is what happens on the lung level, on the ventilation level. But on a cellular level, you actually have a process of respiration that is almost antagonist to it, where you have to have a certain amount of carbon dioxide available in your blood and in the tissues in order for oxygen to go off the red blood cell and into the cells. So as you're doing this strong hyperventilation, you're not only getting a lower amount of oxygen delivered to the brain, but in all tissues. So for a short moment in time, intermittently, that is a good idea. That is great. That is good training for your body. The problem is, though, that a lot of times when people practice this type of hyperventilation, chasing a high, and then they go about their day, is that their body has been so dysregulated from this style of breathing that they carry this dysregulation into their day-to-day life, and then their body starts the day with this dysregulation, and then there's no conscious moment where you snap out of this pattern anymore. So a lot of people hyperventilate consciously, intensely in the morning, and then throughout the day they actually find that they are more stressed, that their body doesn't have the right amounts of energy anymore, and then they think like, oh, but I just need to fix this with more intense breathing. Well, actually, what you see there, what's happening is that their body has become dysregulated, and now they have a low amount of CO2, which causes the wrong breathing stimulus to the body, leading to, for example, a chronic hyperventilation. And that's the last thing that you want. So that's another reason to stop chasing the high. And of course, at some point, this high is going to stay away. So now your body is tuned to breathe with these really intense sympathetic breathing muscles and mechanics. Your body is dysregulated biochemically, and you're not even getting this high that you're trying to get anymore. So how do you get these really strong and intense experiences without breathing very intensely? Well, in my experience, actually, it is not about breathing more. Right? So a lot of people think more is better because more gives me the high. But the thing is that once you have this introduction into breathwork and you know that you can blow your mind with it and you know that intense breathing leads to it, you should know that intense breathing is a shortcut to getting to high. It's almost like a cheat code, but there's other way more profound ways to practice that will give you a much stronger experience of this high, of this psychedelic state, of getting insights and all the things that you're trying to get from it. And that is from training your nervous system to be flexible. So if you only train breathwork to go all the way up in these higher registers, your body won't be able to land properly anymore, while actually a lot of the profound experience, the profound sensations of breathwork are to be found when your body is fully in this restful state. So in the way that I work, I generally use these intense breathing gears, as we call them, to really activate into higher states. And then we land, and then we do calm breath work to actually be able to feel the experiences that belong to these intense states. So that means that you need to take up a breathing practice where you really start to look at some more fine-tuning, some more details, and some more subtle ways of working with your breath. And it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. The most important thing is to understand that doing more breath work to get more high will, in the end, make you worse at breathing and worse at life. And one thing that I can tell you about how to, for example, get these really strong effects and these really high effects and these psychedelic effects without doing hyperventilation is, for example, to be found in the exhale. Just as an experiment, sit down, breathe in through your nose as long as you can, and then start to lengthen your exhale as long as you can. And you keep repeating this and repeating this and repeating this. At some point, you start to bring in your voice. So chanting is one very powerful way to get these beautiful effects. So you breathe all the way in, and then on the exhale, you blow off the air, and at some point you start to add your voice on a drone. You can even play some droning music to hum along with, and you just keep humming and keep humming and keep humming. And then every now and then you take a few very deep breaths, for a few very intense deep breaths, just 5 maybe, and you breathe back in, and you hum. So this is just one way. There's countless other ways, because the thing is, when you engage with breath, you follow the path of breath into your body, you will start to understand how to push the buttons of your nervous system and how to get into certain desired states. So, hyperventilating is a shortcut to getting this high. At some point, it doesn't work anymore, and pretty soon it will start to give you negative effects, let alone the downsides of the risk of fainting, bumping your head, and stuff like this. So, if you're still chasing the high, stop hyperventilating and start to seek out calmer, more subtle breathing practices that allow you to get deeper into your body and to get into even more profound states. All right, if you're a high chaser, let me know if you're triggered or let me know what you think of this video. Click like, click follow, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.